Well, hello everyone. My apologies for being away for so long. My computer crashed, and it was a big crash and cost a lot of money, and I had to earn some money to fix my computer. So I've been a little bit in a tech deficit lately until now. So finally I can get back to doing these recordings and actually getting back to work. It's been fun being a traditional artist for a little while, but it's sort of like losing your phone. You've been so used to it for so long that it's almost like a third arm. And when that arm goes missing, it feels really, really weird. And that's how it's been. I've been enjoying the vacation from technology, but at the same time, I've been cringing and missing it so much, knowing that I have to get things done and I need that technology back. So anyway, enough of the wah stories and on to this lesson. Today's lesson is going to be about drapery. I'm going to start a series on drapery studies and applying drapery or clothing to your figures, since drapery is mostly about the human form. And that's something that I think in a title, it can be misleading because drapery can be, a bunch of things. We could think of drapery as drop cloths that you throw over objects like a couch or curtains in a house, rather than clothing on the body. We're going to examine briefly some of the concepts, but what I want to do today is actually demonstrate the concepts and then break it down further with other videos beyond this one. So today is going to be a demonstration and also going to include some other concepts in this video to help grasp what we do technically speaking and how we're supposed to think about it, both in the mechanics of the drapery, but also in how we see forms with light on them. Because ultimately we're not drawing line work, we're rendering to a finish. Drapery can be really confusing, much like any form drawing can be confusing, especially if you've never taken a form drawing class and understand where the true light source is coming from, where reflected light is, what constitutes a shadow, and so forth. I have these three examples up because they have built into them many of the different folds that we will be studying. There are 7 folds all over the internet, but I've introduced an 8th fold because of the more modern clothing that we have. We have another type of fold that we would need to introduce into that line. So there are actually 8 folds and 9 if we think about action folds. Folds when we're in motion. Those have their own distribution of mass, albeit they come from the 8 primary folds. They have their own flow to them. They have their own design to them. And yet, in some cases, they fall right back into these 8 folds, but not always, especially with baggy clothing, which is what I see a lot of confusion coming from. Is the baggier the clothing, the harder it is to identify which fold to use or how to design it. We're not going to get into those details in this video, but they will be in videos coming. All right, so pointing out some of the folds in here, I'm going to go across the page and identify certain folds by name. And there's an importance to this. By knowing something by name, you know something by trait. You understand the concepts because the name summarizes the concepts. So when you're looking at something, there are logical naming conventions for everything that you see. As much as we sort of think there are no names to certain anomalous things out in front of us, whatever they may be, almost everything does have a name to it. As an artist, it's important to know it sort of by name so that when you look at it, you can call it out and then you can design it. Otherwise, you're sort of left guessing, and guessing is never a good place to be when we're trying to build something with meaning. So across the page here, I would say that of the 8 folds that are out there, we have at least 4 of them in here, if not 5. These are spiral folds. Spiral folds are known for looking like an S. In some cases, looking like a C because of the angle that we are to the model, right? If we were over here looking from this direction, we might only see this part of the fold. So it would have a C curve quality to it. But spirals are typically S curves. We have a diaper fold. Actually, we have several of them here. So these are diaper folds. These are spiral folds. These are drop folds. These are zigzag folds. In here, we have what are called half-lock folds. Now, half-lock folds are typically at a juncture point, like the elbow or under the arm. This is a half-lock fold right here. This is a long half-lock fold right here. It's because the arm is resting against the body and the material is taking a radical 180-degree direction change. In the case of the elbow, the knee, and the hip, it's a 90-degree, maybe even more change in direction, right? We have a sleeve that's a cylinder, but then that sleeve is redirected, and that's what causes the half-lock to occur. Now, a half-lock is part of a zigzag fold, but it changes its properties when it gets smushed together, like these are over here. So that would be a half-lock fold. We do not have inert folds here, and I'm not seeing the new fold, which are called ring folds, but we have 6 of the 8 present within these 3 particular items, the 3 shirts that are worn here. Folds occur because of action and because of scale. So I'm going to create a formula here, and this is how we judge the type of fold that we're looking at. The type of clothing, also known as the cut, plus the size of the clothing. And this is now going into whether it's the body of the shirt or the sleeve of the shirt, the size of that, plus the size of the human wearing the clothing, plus the material type, plus the action equals the type of fold. Now you might look at this and go, are you kidding me? That's so much stuff to think about. But it really isn't. When you are studying something, it at first takes a little bit of time to memorize these items, but eventually they are second nature. You just sort of think about all of those things at the same time, and the answers come very quickly. Like, I don't have to sit there and scratch my head for very long to look at the fold and judge what it is. It's instant. But that's also because I draw from these. I model these in 3D. I judge them on the model or the photo reference. I have taught this. So this information is used kind of religiously in my career and makes it very accessible for me. For somebody new, really what it comes down to is just look at the fold and remember the list of items. And as you learn why certain folds appear the way they do, it will make it easier and easier for you to have a starting point that can then be altered based upon inconsistencies of that name. Like over here, these could be zigzag folds, but they can't be because their length is such, because of the type of shirt he's wearing. He's wearing a silk shirt. So it's a very thin material, and he's also wearing a very loose, baggy shirt, and he's really skinny. So there's no way that these folds could bunch up above his elbow or at his wrist to form the zigzag. These folds are going to drop from the shoulder to the wrist. There's no interruption point along the way, which means they are going to spiral down from the shoulder. So what usually is a zigzag fold, as you can kind of see on the other sleeves, those are all zigzag folds because typically that is what we're going to find on a sleeve or in a pant leg. And sometimes in a shirt, like right over here, these are zigzag folds and so are these over here. It's because the material is resting against the belt line or his hands in his pockets, and the type of material is a little bit heavier. So it's going to crimp or crunch together as opposed to just straight drop like these are here, because those particular areas are not influenced by his hands. So we have 6 of the 8 folds here within these examples. The 2 that are missing are the inert and the ring fold. Those are the ones that are MIA from this particular scenario. Now, in a future video, we'll look at these a little more extensively, but I wanted to take the time here to point out that the examples that I pulled are because they have a lot of intricate folds within them that help us see a good portion of this list. And one of these is going to be used as my demonstration for today, or I might pull a different one because of the lighting. I want to make sure to address the lighting, which is something that I'm going to do next as I pull these demonstrations together. We've reviewed the types of folds. Now we're going to review the types of notans, or lighting a form so that we can render the form with clarity and not get confused by all the nuances. And then I'll get involved in the demonstration. All right, so I'm going to move on to the lighting example now so that we can identify certain traits and their definable names. That way, when we work and you listen to me talk, you'll have a better understanding of what it is that I'm trying to exemplify. In this section, we're going to look at the 2 types of notan. Now, notan, as you can read here, is measuring the difference between light and dark, and or measuring the difference between light and shadow. So light and dark has to do with local values. And let me go ahead and add that in here. And measuring the difference between light and shadow is measuring the difference in low light versus high light, or low light versus strong light. So the very first measure is like what we see here with these 3 objects. There is a light source in here because obviously we couldn't see something without it being lit, but they don't have strong shadows on them, nor do they have reflected lights or any of the other properties that comes from lighting an object. Form shadows, cast shadows, reflected lights, ambient light, and all the other properties of light. And when we're measuring this, we're measuring the difference between, in this case, I have 3 examples here, the white cube, which is at the light end of the value spectrum, the black cube, which is at the dark end or the low end, and then the red cube, which is somewhere in the middle. Red is usually labeled a value 5, directly in between a 0 and a 10, if we're using the Munsell system of measure. Munsell uses 10 values, and that's what most art schools have used over the years. More recently, though, I've noticed that a lot of the value scales that are online have 9 values and not 10. So it depends on how you've trained or how you've been trained that will determine the number of steps in the value scale. But typically, a good quantifiable measuring scale is 10 values, with white and black being the 2 end points of that value scale. White can be either 1 or 10. This has been debatable for years. No one has an exact way of defining objectively which one it should be. Some schools use it as a 10, some schools use it as a 1 or even a 0 on the value numerical system, starting with nothing and getting to something. But which one is nothing and which one is something? Well, that's school to school dependent. We're going to use white as 1 and black is 10 for this discussion. So the red is number 5 in the value scale. And when we jump back into Photoshop, we'll look at that value scale to have a better understanding of what I mean right now, because I don't really have one in here, but I could bring one in here. Give me a moment. Here is a value scale. In this particular value scale, we have black as 0 and white as 10. And here we have another value scale. It's just the opposite, and it only has 9 values. But with this one, I am going to remove it for now, and we're going to use this one. Measuring the difference between the light and the dark. We know that the cube on the right is a dark cube. Some of the faces fall into this, some of them fall into this, and that's because of the light source. Then we have the light cube, and notice that none of the faces actually look like this, but it is a white cube. In the value scale over here, it shows that it's a pure white. So that one is our lightest object. And then the red cube over here falls somewhere in between. It's something right around in here. Probably one of these two, more likely something right in between the two. So when we go to draw these and we go to shade them in, we want all 3 of these to start at their local value. There's no reason to have the white of the paper showing through on any of the surfaces of these objects, with maybe the exception of the white cube, because it is going to be as bright as the white of your paper or your file to start off with. But then we bring in the second measure of Notan, and that's our light source. So I have 2 light sources in here. I have one that's up here. As you can see, it's a very large one. And this is a skylight. That's what you see in the shadows here. You notice that there's like a bluishness to them. And that's the light from way above, lighting the whole space in an ambient way. Much like outdoors, the blue sky is the counterpoint light to the sunlight. There are 2 light sources. This over here is my sunlight. And that's what's producing these cast shadows and form shadows, as well as reflected lights, as you can see over here. Now, if I reduce the lighting down to something low, the shadows are not as strong anymore, and neither is the light on the object. Both of those weaken, and that would be a low contrast Notan, where when I go to bump this up really bright, now we have a high contrast Notan. The distinction between the lit surfaces and the shadow surfaces are extreme. They travel much farther across this value scale between one and the other. But also notice that in all 3 of these objects, the shadow looks a little bit different in intensity. It isn't the case though. Each of these objects is being lit by the same light source, therefore they all have the same contrast on them. But because this object is lighter looking, the shadow will appear lighter in it. But the difference in the light side and the shadow side is the same contrast difference as all 3 of the other objects. What differentiates this is that the darker the object gets, the closer the local value is to that shadow value, which means then that each of these is going to have the same kind of measure to it. The black also absorbs the light more, so you're not going to have as much reflected light unless the surface is glossy, which I can do here. I can change this to a glossier surface, and you can see that it distorts the lighting a lot more. And the more glossy it gets, the less the lighting affects the local surfaces. This area down here is being hit with reflected light from the surface, but the top of the cube is absorbing all the light, and we're seeing it dark unless we rotate it maybe to here. Nope, the skylight is weak enough that it doesn't influence the reflective properties of the surface at all. I'm going to change this back to a rough cube so that we have the same kind of surface for all 3 of these. The red cube has some reflected light in it, not as much as this surface here. And the difference between the shadow side and the light side is the same difference between the shadow and light side here with its respective value. And then again, with the black cube, the same thing. So why does this matter? This matters because, especially coming from all the teaching that I've done, when a student first, or when an unaware artist approaches the shading, there's a tendency to use the white of the paper as the light side of the object, and there's a tendency to make all the shadows exactly the same, which in this case you can clearly see is not part of that. It's someone's naivety getting in front of their judgment, and they automatically shade something in a way that is not producing something believable anymore. Comic books do this a little bit, especially the ones that are inked. All the shadows get black in them, no matter what the object is and how light or dark the object is, because they're using inking techniques to make a graphic image. They defy the whole light and shadow system. Graphic design also can defy it, and in most cases does defy it, because with graphic design, it's not about lighting the object so much as it is about making a graphic impression. Some illustration techniques also defy this, as they're using inventive color. Inventive color being like color recipes or color formulas, complementary, split complementary, triadic, tetradic, analogous, monochrome. That sort of language also means we're defying the logic of light, so to speak, because we're making a graphic statement. Remember that all art is graphic. All art is visually entertaining the eyeball. There's story embedded in it, but graphically we want to catch the attention of the viewer. So we play all these design tricks using the elements of the scene or the object to catch the viewer's attention and draw them in. And then from there, there's a story, and hopefully they can engage in the story and not get lost in the graphic elements. Going back to the Notan measure, though, there are rules to this that make rendering more believable. Understanding the lightness or the darkness of the surface affects how we shade the surface in and how much gradient we place within that object, depending upon how round the object is, how cylindrical the object is, or how planar the object is relative to the direction and the location of the light source. All of those count for how we determine how to shade. In the demonstration that I'm going to do today, hopefully I'm going to remember to attribute this language to the drawing that I'm working on. I wanted to preface the drawing with this information, though, so that you have a better understanding of what it is that I'm doing when I'm going in and rendering the form. So now, with all this information out of the way, let's get over to that demonstration. I've chosen this reference. The other ones were just as good in reference, but this has sunlight on it, where the other ones were more studio lit, and that means the light is a bit more ambiguous. In a studio setting, when fashion photography is photographed, it is to flatten out the light so that you can see the silhouette of the shirt more, or the whatever the clothing is that they're wearing, and you have more access to the full silhouette as a whole, rather than it being buried or hidden in shadows, where every now and again, a photographer is going to go outside and photograph the models in the sunlight. It's a much rarer occasion, but it's good for us as artists to study from, because you have a direct light source now with one solid shadow space. The local value is somewhere right around in here. This particular value right here is the local value. I'm going to put a hint of the clothing in and a hint of the skin. The skin is also relatively close in value to the shirt, but the pants are somewhere more between these two values over here. I'm not going to draw the background or anything else surrounding the model. That would be a waste of time. But I am going to draw the basic shirt and part of the pants and part of the wrist and the neck, or the wrists and the neck, so that we have, and I'll explain this here in just a moment, but I'm setting it up just to demonstrate the shirt. Now, it's important that the model gets drawn in, even with the parts that you may not see, because you need to remember that the clothing is worn, and it's what the person is doing that generates the action, which then in turn causes the folds to occur. So I'm going to begin with my armature, And you know the armature if you've followed the figure drawing series. Here is the torso. We have a lean in the torso. He's propped up on a couch, but his torso is leaning back. And that's what I'm doing here. Drawing this back, bringing this forward and upward slightly. Then his arm is resting on his leg and his other arm is in his pant pocket, which is basically resting against the other leg. This leg is going over in this direction. This leg is dropping straight downward here. I'll drop in the ellipses to show the volume. This arm is out to the side slightly, and the hand is resting somewhere right around in here on the leg. That gives me a target to aim for the arm cylinder. The perspective lines, knowing which direction the arm is angled. This hand is somewhere right around in here. The elbow is somewhere right around down here. So again, I have targets to aim for here to help create that action. Now, in my usual way, I'm going to lighten the value of the armature. I'm going to lighten the value of the armature. And I'm going to make one change to it. I'm going to flex the arm this way. So there's a little bit of a bend in this particular direction. And then reposition the hand. Now remember that the armature is not the muscles. The armature is just the container for the skeleton, which is why they're as thin as they are. Now this man is skinny, but the armature does not begin with the muscular shapes, and they do not influence, the muscles do not influence the design of the clothing that we're looking at, which is what I'm doing now, adding the muscles, especially up here on the shoulders. This is the only place on his torso that is influencing the shape of the shirt. His pants are influenced by the thighs, the top of his thighs here and here. You have this sharper edge along the top of both of those. But everything else is buried deep within the cut of the clothing. All right, now for the silhouette of the clothing. Collar is high. The shirt drops off of the shoulder, comes down to the elbow, which is extruded outward farther because of the flexion. His pocket of his pants, somewhere right around here. The cuff of his pants is here. The shirt comes forward along here and here. The collar comes around over here. Shirt sleeve again comes out farther over here. Then comes out and extends off of the arm here. Extends off of the arm here. The cuff of the shirt. And then the rest of the shirt extends through here. His belt is pinching the shirt back, but it does hang over slightly right along in here. Then we have the collar that comes around this way. We draw a horseshoe shape that connects both sides together. Then do that same horseshoe shape for the other half of it. And then it comes forward here. Then this drops straight down and comes out like so. Then there's his pants, and the crotch in the pants is longer than the bottom of the torso. This goes over to the top of the thigh over here, where his hands are under the pants material here. Then the clothing comes off of his torso over on this side, drops lower than his leg over here, and then the fly comes out this way, the top of his thigh over here. And there's a few things I want to come back and change. The shoulders could be a little bit more sturdy looking. Draw the line first, erase the mistake second. Don't start with the erasing of the mistake, or you lose reference to what you did wrong in the first place. And then I'll hint at his wrist, the knuckles of the hand, the thumb, the index finger, and then a hint of the rest of the fingers, and leave it at that, because this isn't a hand demo. This is more about the clothing, so I don't want to get lost in the weeds with this one. All right, so that's the basic silhouette. Now what I want to do is I want to track each of the folds. This fold is going up over the shoulder. There's a big fold here swinging down into the elbow. There's a half lock fold here. And this is why the ellipses are so important, because they help me remember which way to curve the folds to make them feel believable on the torso, on the limbs, and so forth. Folds shooting across this way. Now this line represents the center of each of the pipes. Every fold is designed with a pipe shape because the material is bending into a new direction. So it bunches up, turns into a pipe. The heavier the material, the larger the pipe. The lighter the material, the thinner the pipe. In some cases, the folds look like a sharp angle change as opposed to a pipe. There are lots of little subtle folds up here. And there's the pocket, which I definitely want to add into this. And then the buttons. These are all technically, the button isn't on this side though. It's over on the other side. Technically, the buttons are important because they are a point of tension where a fold will gather. In this case, they're not getting in the way of the folds because the material, the shirt is so big and baggy that they aren't influencing this particular cut, but many times they will do that. There's a fold here and here aiming towards that button. Then this one tucks into this fold. There's a larger pipe right over here. Then there's a small fold back here. There's a few zigzags in here. There's another zigzag right along in here. Another one here. And then two drop folds here on the shoulder. There's a long fold dropping off the shoulder here, and then a few vertical zigzags over in this particular area. Then there are zigzags here, here. I'm going to come back down here first and work my way back up to those folds. A zigzag that's turning into a half lock. Another zigzag right here, shallower through here. And then another zigzag kind of tucked in right along through here. The pocket terminates just above this line, fills in this space over here. And all of these lines are very large and very heavy right now because I'm not at the stage where I'm being delicate about what I need to draw. I'm mapping. And this is also going to be reduced in scale as I work my way around this. There's a zigzag fold here, but I will probably not get to these folds because again, it's not about the pants today. It's about the shirt. There's enough to do in the shirt. There's another fold crease right here. This actually comes down this way. And then there's these small folds that are at each corner of the pocket where there's tension forming from the pocket. There's a small change in direction along here, but it isn't necessarily turning into a small, like a noticeable pipe. This pipe is across here like so. All right, now I'm going to reduce this in value. I'm going to do a new layer on top of this, and this is where I'm going to design the piping so that you can see the shape of each fold. This one is the largest pipe on the sleeve over here. Comes around, and then this pipe runs into it. Then we have the pipe here and another one right here running into this crease fold, which is a thin pipe that terminates right here, running into this much larger one here. So this one goes around like this. It's a very large pipe. Then there's a thin pipe here, another thin one here that then travels up this way. Then it zigzags down this way. And this pipe continues across through here. Draw the lines first that need to be correcting the shape and then erase the mistakes. So this pipe is going to be something like this across here. The fold that drops down along here is piping through here and then turns into an intersection pipe, which is the zigzag right along here. Then comes up and splits into a zigzag-like pipe up here. Then we have the other side of this zigzag pipe, a fold right over here. then all of this is one big fold down along through here. We have the smaller pipes here. This one rotates upward this way. This one comes up this way. There's two small pipes right here and here, and that turns into one longer one, and that goes up and over. This one branches into a zigzag fold here, up into the collar. There's another smaller zigzag from this one. It's the interior of this one. And then there's another zigzag right over here. And then, as I'd mentioned before, there's a pipe right through here. Then there's a small pipe here, a small one here, a small one here. There's another one here that folds underneath this one that comes up and over this way. Then this one that comes down this way runs into this one along here, which then blends in with this one here, then turns into the half lock. This goes around this way, goes out to the corner or the edge of the sleeve. It's actually going around the sleeve, but we're seeing it like a graphic edge. There's a little corner here. This goes all the way across and into the side of his body. This is traveling down too far. I'm going to move this, erase this, give myself back the space along here, find the pinch point here, run this into the cuff. Then the wrist. There's kind of a half lock forming here, pipe right here and a pipe right here. This is crimping because of his hand in his pocket. Then this fold heads towards the crotch. And there's a pipe on this side and a pipe on this side. Then there's a small set of folds over here coming from the tension of his waist over here. The belt loop, the belt buckle. This curves around through here. Cuff comes out this way. There's a small pipe right here, one right behind it. Another small one right here. There's one along here that weaves this way. This goes back in this direction. Then this folds in this way, cuts across here, half locks, or in this case, it's zigzagging here, but it's half locking down here. This could actually be a little narrower too, which would buy me back some space up around in here. Small one here, small one that goes up and over this way. This turns and goes this way. This one goes up this way, and all of this comes out and turns into the rest of the sleeve. So this is the visual noise that all the pipes are making. Oh, this collar is folding outward as well. This is resting against his torso while this is coming forward to the viewer. Then we also have the collar over on this side, the buttons again. This is where the glasses are resting against the shirt, and this comes out this way. Now, the other thing that I will have my students do is I will have them do cross contours to remind them of what they're looking at. And I have a demonstration about this that I will show again in another video as I get more and more involved in explaining the architecture of folds and so forth. But for now, we're just going to work with this. What I'm doing is I'm drawing cross contours downward and across the body to show the volumes that we're dealing with. Then this lips out, goes across. This goes across, goes up and over, and around. And I'm putting only a few in for now. I'm not going to get lost in doing too many of these because this in itself could take quite a long time to develop. But what I'm showing here is the path that an ant would travel if it's climbing up the torso to get up and over and around the folds. And each one of these different little bumps is arcing up and over each of the pipes. I hope that makes sense, because this is what we're looking to interpret, this kind of volume within each of these fold spaces. And I can do this everywhere on the figure, and by the time I get done with this, it should look very similar to a 3D model with all of its quad faces. So I'm only going to do those 4 for now, just to kind of give an indication of what it is that I'm going to be looking for as I start to shade the forms in. I'm looking at the dimensions of each of these pipes and generating volume out of this. So linearly speaking, I'm done with this part. I'm going to take this and also reduce it in value much lower than everything else, because that's not what I'm shading into. It's technically what I'm looking at when I'm designing these. Now, I think I might do one more clean line art. I'm going to shrink. I'm going to reduce the size of my brush so I have a nice tight line to work with here. And as I draw in each of these details, I may reposition them or rescale them according to what I'm actually seeing, getting everything to fit a little bit better together. I'm not going to get too caught up in recreating every little line that I've drawn already. I'm using the underdrawing as the roadmap for those. What I want is to at least identify all the largest plane changes, where things have the most radical design change to the surface, and interpret them as closely to what I see as possible. And here again, I don't want to get too caught up in details. I just want to bring this out far enough so I have the hand shape blocked out near the wrist. And the same thing over here. I'm not going to put in the watch for now. It's more important that I just map out the clothing. And there is the belt. But you can see that, it hasn't taken very long at all. It's 25 minutes in, and look how many layers I've already developed. The drawing is practically taking care of itself now because of the roadmap that I've given myself to work over. All the folds up here are so subtle, it really doesn't need them as of right now to help generate this template. All right, so that's pretty much it for what I'm going to do here now. Oh, there's this collar also that I forgot to finish. Okay, so that's the primary design, the big picture design of what we're looking at. There's a few lines that need to be nudged and budged over left to right and so forth, but the concept is there. The big picture concept is ready to go. You can see that I'm repositioning some of the lines to get them a little bit closer to the design that's in the photograph. And then finally a line or two up here for the neck. The chin is somewhere roughly right around here. The throat, and we're good. Next, I'm going to lay in the local values. This first part, I'm going to do the local values. I put a value scale in here again so that we can sort of see what values I'm reaching for. Another way to check this would be to go up into image mode and go grayscale so that you can see the values. There's the values. So the shirt is close to this value here. The skin is close to this value right here. And the pants are close to this value up here. If you look at his wrist, though, his wrist is closer to the shirt value than this is up here because the neck is facing away enough from the light that it's indirectly lit. So it is a little bit darker looking, but that doesn't mean that that's how dark his skin is. That's why you examine everything. And by looking at his hand, which is true in facing the sunlight, like the shirt, it's about a quarter value darker than the shirt. The shirt does have some reflective areas on it, so I'm kind of also looking through the mid spaces, and it's really, really close to the same value. So that's something to keep in mind. Now I'm going to go back to the color version because I like doing these from the color and not from the grayscale. I feel like I'm going to learn more if I work towards seeing the value through the color as opposed to seeing the value in the value space. But that's a way of checking to make sure that your values are working fairly close. So now I will go and grab the value instead of pick the value, because you also want to you don't want to use mechanical tools to do the work for you when you're learning. When you're doing, maybe you have a deadline, and that's when you can jump into the mechanical tools. But while you're learning, it's best to learn by eyeball, by actually viewing it and then deciding from the view. Remember, I'm not doing the background. I'm just doing the shirt, the pants, and the skin tone. And the pants and the skin tone are a part of this to double check the shirt, to make sure that the value of the shirt is moving in the right direction. Now I'm going to go back in and just clean up a few of these edges a little bit. I'm not going to get too caught up in beautification because this is an exercise. It's not about making things look pretty. It's about making things look accurate because we want to learn something from the experience. All right. Now the pants. Somewhere right around in there. Now, a faster way of doing this is to, because it is a lot faster, is to take the lasso tool and lasso trap the space that you're pulling the values into. Not only is it faster, but it's flat and nice and even. And that's exactly where you want all your values to be when you're first laying in the tones. You're not looking for the white of the paper to assist you with lighter or darker values when you're learning. You are looking to match the information as closely as you can to what you think you see. And then you judge it afterwards. You compare notes and that sort of thing. And if there's anything that's a little bit off, then you make changes to it. The belt is a little bit lighter through here. It's even lighter in this one corner, but it's the same belt all the way across. So there's no reason to vary the values in the belt. All right, so those are the local values. That's the first set of Notan tones that you're dropping into the picture. Now I'm going to take my cross contours and turn those off. And I'm going to take this layer and I'm going to turn it into a multiply layer so I can see my other architecture underneath there to help me render the form when I eventually get to that point. Now the next Notan we're going to do is light and shadow Notan. And this is going to be set to multiply, although you could do it in normal mode as well. In fact, you know what? No, I'm going to keep it on multiply because I still want to be able to see the architecture to know where to turn the forms once I start rendering the gradations. Now with this, I need to judge how strong is the light source. I usually don't look on the model first. I look everywhere else. So on the ground, you can see these shadows. You can see that the blue sky is influencing those shadows. And the contrast point is, if this is the light of the ground, the shadow is somewhere right around in here. 1, 2, 3, 4 value jump between the light of the ground and the value of the shadow. So somewhere in here, probably more this value, which is a little bit lighter than what I made the pants. Somewhere right around in there. Then I'm going to go block in each of the shadow spaces. That's a little too dark. So remember, it's on multiply. So I want to take the shadow value and then go a little bit lighter. That way it reflects the true nature of the value, because remember that multiply blending mode is literally doing that. It's multiplying two layers together. There's a cast shadow across here. This comes up like this and then goes up into the fold here. His neck is casting a shadow, and I'll make a better edge out of that shortly. I want to get the big block in first and not get caught up in following contours too soon. I mean, there is going to be a point when that needs to happen, but right now is not that time. Right now, it's more about making sure that you have the big shapes in to then judge how to fine tune them. There is some shadow going on in here and right up in here. Then along the backside here, inside here, up this way, all of the inside over here, the underside of this, all of this side, all of this right along in here and down here. There's a sliver of light showing through, up through here, all of this. And then over on this side, along in here, little tiny baby shadow here, little tiny baby shadow across there. Then the wrist, because remember his skin tone and the shirt are pretty much the same value. And then this wrist under the watch, there is a shadow there for sure. We just don't see it. Now, the shadow in the pants, I need to think about how dark they are. So there's somewhere right around in here. And then the same distance down for this photograph is going to take us to, that's too dark. That's too black. Remember, again, go a little bit lighter than what you think because you have the multiply that you're working with. So all of this drops into shadow. Along here drops into shadow. Where the shirt falls over the belt here, here, and right up in here. Then this side of his pants coming from the pocket, then under the hand along here. Everything through here is a halftone. That's not a shadow. Might look like a shadow, but it's definitely not. Now looking at the jump between this and this and the jump between this and this, in my mind, I have to justify, do they look the same or does one look lighter than the other? And I'm going to call them the same for now. Actually, I'm going to go lighter on the pants, on the shadow on the pants. Open up the light just a little bit. You may not be able to visually see it that easily, but I'm definitely making these values lighter. All right. Now we have both of the major notans drawn into the picture. Well, there is a little bit of what I did forget is right up along here and here, which ends earlier down here. And then there's the shadow right along here. There is a shadow along here as well. It has reflected light in it, which makes it not look as much like a shadow because it's so small, but it's definitely a shadow. Everything else in this picture now is a halftone. There are no more shadows in this particular area that I'm drawing into. All the rest of it is a halftone. Now, this is something that you have to train your eyes to see. It isn't going to be easy to spot at first when you're first learning, unless you already know something about light and shadow. Now you could say, but what about these really dark ones in here? Those are occlusions. Those are a shadow, but they're a different kind of mark. And what we're looking for right now is the overall average. Reflected lights, we don't think about. Occlusions, we don't think about. We make the statement of how light and how dark things are in relationship to each other so that we can look at the big picture and understand what we're looking at. Then from here, we add gradients. The gradients are the next thing. That's the bridge between the light and the shadow. Now with this, I will jump over into a new layer, call it gradations, and I'm going to keep it opaque and I'm going to put it above all of the shadow layers that I've built here. Oh, I forgot to just use the layers that I have already. That's why I'm a little confused there. And then I'm going to build the gradients on this particular layer. I'm going to grab the shadow layer or the shadow color the shadow value, and I'm going to begin rolling out from the edges of those shadows along here. And what I am attempting to do while I make these is overlap the line art to get rid of it. Now, when the shadow goes a little bit too large, I'll use the local value and paint back into it to soften the gradation even further. Soften this gradation. Now there's going to be a little bit of fighting going on here because I'm recording this. The CPU is working with the art program as well as the recording program, and sometimes it's going to take a moment for things to happen, and I do apologize for that. I shouldn't have to, because I mean that's what happens here when you record using recording software and you use some kind of art program. There is going to be some funkiness happening between the two of them, but regardless, everything here is going to be in real time. Now I'm going to go into silent mode so that I can speed up this render and finish up the rest of this, because this is going to take a little bit of time. I'll come back at the end and I'll make remarks about everything that I've done and why I chose to do things a certain way. All right, here we go. Okay, so everything here is now built with these little subtle gradations. And the gradations begin at the edges of the shadows and then work their way out into the open areas. And as the gradations fill the space, I have extra space left over for the islands, which are going to be the halftones that aren't connected to any shadows. That's what you would call them, or islands. And then you're filling those spaces. As you fill all those spaces together, you start to see where things went wrong in scale, and then make the changes to the scale of things. So I'm pulling edges back, moving them over, making them more angular, making them more curvy, but I'm constantly making micro adjustments from there. And you can see that in a very short period of time, the whole thing is finished. There's not a lot more to do. I mean, there's definitely always something to do. There's always something that can be improved upon, but for the most part, it's done. The big picture is in, the shape language is there, the forms read, and that's the whole idea of this, is to build upon the forms to get the forms to read so that things feel three-dimensional. And I'm being a little OCD here with some of these details, but anyway, now what's left to do is add a little personality to it, but I'm not going to go there because that's called the final render. And I'm not here to render this thing to death. I'm here to show you that anything can be done very quickly if you have a process for it, if you have a breakdown. And the breakdown is as follows. We have the line drawing, local values measured in Notan, shadow values with the local values measured with Notan, and then the gradations that connect them all together. If you do it that way, you will get things done very fast, especially if you're learning. And then once you've learned what it is that you're doing, take it and make it your own. Take it and make it your own. Find a way that you feel most comfortable and build your pictures and make them so. Drawing and painting is not difficult to do as long as you know that there's a foundation that sits underneath it. And I mean drawing and painting in terms of making things realistic looking. If you're going to do abstract or any kind of other ism, cubism, abstractionism, expressionism, you don't need to be so literal in your definition of what form it is, the perspective involved, and all the other nuances that make up realism. But realism is not a difficult thing to accomplish if you have a working procedure and you learn how to build in those stages, like I'm doing here. Everything is being built up in a step, one step at a time, and at the end of it all, there's a finished picture. Highlights are not white. Highlights in photographs are usually white because the camera cannot discern anything different. The light is so bright in contrast to the things that it's photographing that it is automatically going to default to white. And that is not what we want to be doing at all. But you're going to learn that in your form drawing exercises. Me saying this to you right now probably doesn't mean very much, but there's a lot of artifacting that occurs from a camera. Camera can't legitimately read color and contrast clearly together at the same time. It picks one or the other. And then you have the chip in the camera because everything's digital now. And that chip is an RGB chip. And whichever color is the most dominant color, everything else shifts in that direction. There's all these little problems that arise from photography that, as long as you've done some drawing from life, you can fix, you can adjust, and you can own that picture space. But again, it takes practice, learning, practice, follow through, especially the follow through. It's really difficult for some to practice. They get bored. It's taking too long. I want to go do something else now, and so forth. That's on you. That has nothing to do with making art. Art has always been the same. It is labor intensive. It takes time and it takes patience, but it also takes knowledge to be able to do it well enough. If you're willing to put in the time and the practice, if you're willing to sacrifice time to learn and to really stay focused on learning, reducing your work down to stages and steps, getting critiques, and following through with fixing your picture based upon those critiques, there's no way you can't make really cool art that looks realistic and has a solid foundation to it. But with that being said, don't let that stuff discourage you either. If you want to make art, and don't feel bad that you don't know certain things. Go learn them if you feel bad, but don't feel bad and let that get in the way of you making something that you truly feel inspired by. All right. Well, I'm back for now. We'll see what happens. Hopefully the computer stays legit, and I can make more videos slightly faster than I have been lately so that I can get a few more out to all of you. But in the meantime, thank you for watching. Thank you for coming in and checking this out. I hope you found this information useful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, and I'm more than happy to get back to you and answer those questions. Take care, everybody. I'll see you in the next video.